Good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking the time out of your day. I'm Andy Barlow, Partner Program Manager working for Jake Pappas. The purpose of this webinar is to introduce you to ProSTEP. ProSTEP is a trusted partner in good standing. They are an ISV and System Integrated certified, and recently we added ProSTEP's OpenPDM solution to the Eris price list. ProSTEP brings to Eris subject matter expertise, access to PLM applications, and experience in the area of PLM interoperability that Eris really doesn't have. This aligns well with Eris's overlay and coexistence strategy. I have with me Paul Downing. Paul is President and CEO of ProSTEP. He will speak for about 20 minutes and leave about 10 minutes for Q&A. He'll introduce ProSTEP, speak briefly about what their product and service offerings are, how to identify opportunities, and who to reach out to at ProSTEP should you identify an opportunity. We think it's important that you are aware of their success and what they are doing. Jay Pappas is also present and will help answer questions at the end if Paul and I cannot address them. Paul?
Thanks, Andy. Welcome, everybody, and like Andy said, thanks for your time. I know everybody's busy. We have a short presentation, just a handful of slides to give you an overview of ProSTEP and OpenPDM. Really, we want to show how we can help facilitate your sales and make sure that you can get the customer to sign on a dotted line as quickly as possible by addressing some of their integration needs early on in the sales cycle, as opposed to letting those dwell on forever. So again, my name is Paul Downing, and I manage our North American operations for ProSTEP. I've been with ProSTEP around about 15 years now and started our North American subsidiary. We're a little bit of a different company than you may be experienced working with. Across the bottom of this slide deck, you can see a series of logos. These are the owners of ProSTEP. Each of these organizations own roughly 10% of ProSTEP. So we're not your typical, we're for profit, but we're not your typical, giant Microsoft type style software company with those aspirations, right? We're really more industry focused, and our ownership reflects that. One of the owners that I wanted to mention in particular is an organization called ProSTEP IVIP. And let me jump over to a slide on that, and I'll come back to the others. ProSTEP IVIP is a nonprofit standards consortium that focuses on industry best practices in the engineering space. So we have implementers forums, we have benchmarking around CAD and PLM, we have best practices for migration. So this nonprofit group really represents what ProSTEP is, right? Again, working for industry standardization, industry best practices. So you may have heard the term STEP. Obviously, ProSTEP is part of our name, and we've got a strong heritage in helping design and ratify various STEP standards and bring them forward into the ISO certification process. You may have heard things like LOTAR, long-term archiving. Again, another working group that is being led by ProSTEP along with several other standards. So we've got a really rich heritage in working with standards-based interoperability and engineering practices. Meanwhile, we've been in business about 25 years, so we've been doing this a long time. This is engineering, information systems, integration, interoperability, and migration. Increasingly, we are focused on whatever you want to call Industry 4.0 or IoT, and so on. We're really focused on helping companies gather all this information from around the organization and do something productive with it, as opposed to keeping it siloed. So really we're about opening up those silos, breaking down those barriers of interoperability between the different organizations. One of the ways that we facilitate that is through our strong partnerships. And again, what sets us apart is that we are technical partners as well as sometimes business partners with most of the leading companies in this space. Of course, Eris, we know about, but companies like Autodesk and Dassault and PTC and SAP and Siemens and on, many that aren't even listed here. So what that means is we are able to create products that are based on vendor certified API layers. We're able to put our commercial off-the-shelf products under maintenance contracts because we have strong maintenance relationships with all these organizations. So we look at ourselves as a vendor-neutral platform for interoperability, right? We do not resell PTC products. We do not resell SAP products. We don't resell Eris products, right? So we're not competing with these companies directly. We're just helping all of them talk to each other and interoperate. As I mentioned, we've been doing this a long time. I'll drill into a little bit more details on some customer examples later. This is just, again, just a handful of customers over the past 25 years, but it gives you a flavor of what our customer base looks like. And just a high-level introduction to our product. The primary product that we're talking about here is called OpenPDM. And we find this puzzle architecture slide typically the most useful to very quickly show how things connect. Of course, it's a little bit more complex behind the covers. But we have in the middle an OpenPDM platform. This is a product that is installed on-premise at the customer site. Of course, it could be installed Amazon or Azure or whatever, but it's a dedicated solution. And then we're modular in our approach. So we can connect any number of systems together in any number of combinations. So again, what sets us apart is our connector strategy. We do not make point-to-point connectors. I mean, you can certainly deploy it in something that looks like a point-to-point solution. But as an example, we do not make an SAP to Aras point-to-point connector. We make an Aras to OpenPDM, we make an SAP to OpenPDM, we make a Windchill to OpenPDM, and so on. This allows us to hook together any number of systems to have real-time transactions happening between all of these systems. What this means for your customers is, let's say they start off today with Aras and Teamcenter, and tomorrow they acquire a division with Windchill. You don't have to reinvent the solution. You, again, conceptually, I'm simplifying, you plug in the Windchill connector, and you do not have to reconfigure the other connectors that you have in the system. You plug in the Windchill connector, it can start participating in these conversations. It can be exposed to everything that's plugged into that platform. So it's very modular, it's very expandable, it's very scalable as opposed to a point-to-point solution, which you end up with kind of a spaghetti mess by doing that. Again, as Andy mentioned, ProSTEP and Aras, we've been working together informally for a long time. We officially joined as an integration partner in 2015, and then we became an ISV recently, and we're also working on a services partnership. But just as an example, I mentioned the ProSTEP IVIP consortium earlier. Eris was a major sponsor of that event that we had in Stuttgart earlier this year, and we highlighted our use case for the work that we did at Scheffler, which I'll talk about in a minute. So again, conceptually, what we're trying to do for you and for your customers is to expand the capability of Innovator to allow it to have bidirectional interoperability with anything that's connected to it. So out of the gate, you'll find in the Eris price list connectors for Teamcenter, for 3D Experience, for Windchill, for SAP. We figured these are the top four, right? Of course, as you saw on the puzzle piece earlier, ProSTEP has dozens of connectors to dozens of different types of systems. We just didn't want to overload the CRM system with this information. And so if you don't see something here that you or your customers need to connect to, just ask. All of our connectors have kind of standard functionalities, such as being able to query objects, export objects, create new objects, and so on. Because we use the client API layers for most of our integrations, in effect, we have the capability to do anything that a client can do. So if a client can download a file or upload a file or revise an assembly or release an assembly, we have the inner workings to do all of those things. So in general, the answer is if someone says, you know, can you do this? If a client can do it, we can do it. Well, I'm not going to go on this call too deep into the technology stack. Certainly we can do that later, and I've got some backup slides at the end of this deck that also have some further explanation. But we are using OpenPDM deployed on a Tomcat application server because our code is Java-based. We're using standard SOAP and REST calls to communicate with our Eris connector, and then our Eris connector is using .NET interface to talk to the Eris API layer. So this is kind of what our connectors look like, and this is how we get information from the peripheral systems into OpenPDM where that data can be enacted upon, right? So in OpenPDM, we have business logic, we have mapping capabilities, we can do transformations, all sorts of things. So the example I use, you may have one system calling something a part, another system calling something an item, maybe something is an 8-digit part number, but it needs to be reconfigured or concatenated with a 10-digit part number in the target system. All that logic can be happen in the OpenPDM platform. So I'll show you a demonstration in a minute here. Basically, we're going to show information coming from Siemens, Teamcenter, and being remapped into Aras Innovator. But again, this is just a different view. You're going to see 3 or 4 different ways to represent the same information. And again, it just really depends on what resonates. Let me show you one of those videos briefly. This is a 1-minute video. And again, we're going to show information starting in Teamcenter and then synchronizing that information with Eris. So here we're starting in Teamcenter. We've drilled down to an assembly. We've opened that assembly. We can see it here. It's lovely. It's a seat. We're going to do a manual trigger to send information over to Eris. So you can see that menu pick there. And behind the scenes, this information is being sent. So we don't want to bog down the client. We're a server-based product. So we passed some metadata back to our back-end architecture called OpenPDM and said, hey, this user wants to send this object from system A to system B. And then in the back end, we log into system A, you know, export the data, check out the data, whatever is appropriate. And then we do any transformation that's necessary, and then we import that information into the target system. It's also worth mentioning here, we're showing you a manual trigger, but these triggers can be based on literally anything, right? So change of state, check in, check out, workflow components, anything that you can imagine, we can program that. We have companies that do this not on a event trigger, but on a time trigger. And so at the end of the day, they want to go through and synchronize 500,000 objects between company A and company B. That's fine, right? So all of those things are supported with the ProSTEP platform. So let me continue the video. And so again, this is the back end of our server. This is just showing you the activity manager that I mentioned earlier. The end user is not going to see this. We're just showing this because everybody wants to see, can you show me moving data from point A to point B? Well, it's a back-end server process, so I can show you the process happening, but you know, there's mapping happening behind the scenes. So now if we pop into Innovator and we drill down to that same assembly, that BOM structure is there. And again, on the long play version, we do there's nothing up my sleeve. Let me show you that the object is not an Eris. Let me show you the object is in Teamcenter, you know, and so on. So now we're bringing up the file. It's the same file in Innovator that we showed in Teamcenter. And that's the end of this short video, right? Again, just because we want to keep this call relatively short, I know everybody's time is valuable. If you want to see it back sync, that's another video that's on there. If you want to see the full round trip, that's the long play video that's on that partner portal. So again, when we talk about differentiating ProSTEP products from potentially some other competitive products, we talked about the modular approach that we have. We talked about that we're not point-to-point, we're a platform-based solution. We've talked about the strong activities and mapping capability that we have built into the product. So from our point of view, this is really an enterprise commercial off-the-shelf product, right? That doesn't mean that you turn it on and it instantly configures itself and it magically starts to work. It just means that it's a commercial product with support behind it, with development behind it, with maintenance behind it. It's not something that's cobbled together in the field, right? So one example where we worked together recently is Schaeffler, and they deployed the Aras engineering cockpit, and that is a representation where they can roll up the information and configurations from a variety of different systems. You can see that it's connected here in the middle to a ProSTEP OpenPDM via our Eris connector. And then you can see the other components that are connected. So we have a couple integrity connectors, we have a windshield connector, we have a Creo connector, we have a 3D experience connector, and an SAP connector, right? So this becomes the de facto integration bus for Schaeffler. And through OpenPDM, again, we act as kind of a super API to get deep access, bi-directional, to all these other systems. So again, it is real, it is commercial, it does exist. I'm going to highlight a couple other examples really quick, and again, there's details if you go into the notes, right? So all these things have the notes on them. So if you download that presentation, you can get those details. But here's one example that is currently running at Embraer Airlines. We did a very large integration project between Innovia VPM. They have half a dozen of them. They are migrating or have migrated and stood up Windchill from PTC. And they also are using ERP for manufacturing bills of materials. So we act in the middle, moving data back and forth on a daily basis between VPM and Windchill. And then when they release it and they want to create from an engineering BOM, they want to create a manufacturing BOM, we go through a transformation process and post that information into SAP. And that's been running successfully now for about 4-ish years. Another example is a joint venture between Bombardier and Siemens Transportation. So this is not the Siemens PLM per se, this is the bigger Siemens group. And what we're doing here is facilitating a data exchange between Bombardier's Team Center Enterprise, so very old stuff, and Innovia VPM. And then we're transforming that, putting it into a standardized structure, packaging that, and secure data exchange over to Siemens. So again, another example where, because this is commercial products, right, we wrote a connector for Team Center Enterprise, we wrote a connector for VPM. Both those products are years and years and years old as far as software is concerned. Still supported, still working, still in use today. I think this is our last example. A company called Webasto. They make the sunroofs and roofing panels for various automobiles. And again, another simple example where we're moving data back and forth between 3D Experience and Windchill. In the middle there's some transformation happening. In this case, we're using Theorem as a CAD translator, but we could use anything. So I put this in here to highlight that we play well also with third-party tools and other vendors. We don't write necessarily our own CAD translators, and we can always step things out and step things back in if you're familiar with CAD. But a lot of times you need to bring in a more industrial strength CAD translator that's doing some native-to-native translations as well as some value checking, making sure that the data is fit before it gets imported. And lastly, engineering data exchange with BMW. Again, this is another example. Up till now, for the most part, we've been talking, except for the Siemens example, internal integration. We also do external integration because OpenPDM, again, being a commercial tool, is built to SOA standards and architectures, so it can be either distributed architecture or decentralized architecture. The same thing that we can do inside a company, we can do outside a company, right? So we have products running both at Pininfarina, I can never say that right, and BMW. And so we facilitate data exchange between these two different companies, and we move structures data, bombs, metadata, as well as robust CAD data between these systems in a synchronized fashion. So, we're talking potentially, tens of thousands of bomb lines and synchronizing tens of thousands of changes every day. And that's what I mean by enterprise strength integration tool. All right, so quick time check. We're running short, but almost done. This is our pricing structure, and it's in the Aras CRM tool, so you can get this as well. Our target customer is probably 250 users or above. We've got very small companies using our products and very large companies, like we mentioned, Airbus, Embraer, a lot of military companies are using our products. So it scales very well. We don't officially offer a 100-user version, but if you've got something that's really strategic, give us a call and let us know. From a pricing standpoint, we have the base product, OpenPDM, with the Eris connector. And then you can pick and choose how many connectors you need for each of the other systems, right? So if, for example, you had 500 users and you wanted to connect Eris to SAP, it would be one of these and one of these, right? And come out to a total annual price of $47,000. If they had SAP and Team Center, then you would need 2 of these. If they had 3 SAPs, then you would need 4 of these, right? So we price per instance. If you have any questions, just contact one of our ProSTEP. Again, we just want to put a quick screenshot. When you look at My Innovator, you can see the pricing is listed there. On the screen here, there are 3 contacts. You're welcome to contact any or all of us or none of the above. So again, my sphere of responsibility is ProSTEP Inc. That's a subsidiary of ProSTEP AG, which is part of ProSTEP Group. I'm located in the greater Detroit area of Michigan, and I've got a team here that handles the Americas, primarily North America, but we also, like Embraer Airlines, have accounts outside of North America. Also, I'm not sure if he's on the phone. I can't see the attendee list, but we've got Bert Dubel, who handles our Aras-related sales as well as a bunch of other stuff for the rest of the world. So if you're looking at this on a recording and you're not in North America or South America, then Bernd is your person. And then finally, on the phone here, we also have Peter Falsgraf, and he's the product manager. So probably I would say 90% of your questions are going to go to either Bernd or myself. But if you really want to get into bits and bytes and features and capabilities and talk about the Eris connector, what it does do or doesn't do, Peter manages that process.
I think if nobody has any other questions, thanks everybody for joining. Again, this will be recorded. It will be posted in the website that Paul has set up. And if you're having trouble, feel free to reach out to myself or Jay, and we'll either answer the question or get you in contact with the right person.